everyone. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through this World Power Letter. This is a little bit of a challenging assignment, and so I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the key ideas in it. First of all, the assignment asks you to write a letter either supporting or opposing imperialism. Remember, imperialism being collecting various colonies around the world to increase the strength of the United States. So first, let's talk a little bit about the roles you can take. You can be just an American citizen. You could be a citizen of the Philippines, Guam, or Puerto Rico, or a citizen of another imperial nation. And you're writing a letter to the editor expressing your approval or disapproval of U.S. foreign policy regarding territorial expansion. Okay, you want specific examples in each paragraph, and you're going to look at the primary documents to support your point. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. You're looking at primary sources. So primary source, this is the first time we've really talked about primary sources in this course. Primary sources are sources from the time period. So a secondary source is things like a textbook. It's written about the time period, but it wasn't written during the time. Primary sources are things like speeches, letters, diaries, even newspaper articles that were written in the time period when things were happening, okay? Now in this case, you're going to look at 5 different primary sources that some are for imperialism, some are against. I'll give you a hint. I have kind of grouped them. These top 3 are for imperialism. Bottom 2 are both anti. You can tell it says the Anti-Imperialist League right here. We're going to go through these documents and try to figure out what were these people arguing and were they arguing, what was their core argument for or against imperialism, because you can use the same arguments in your letter. Now I want to give you a heads up. One of the tough things about working with primary sources is that we are exposed to some ideas that now we think are absolutely awful, but at the time they were commonly held beliefs. It just shows the way that our country has evolved and our core ideas have changed over time. And so as we look at some of these primary documents, you may find some ideas that are downright offensive, but remember that they are historical documents. They're helping you understand how people were thinking at that time. You can think of them as a starting point, and from there people's ideas changed to what we would accept now, but at the time these ideas were completely acceptable. So look at this first document, Reverend Josiah Strong's book, Our Country, Its Possible Future and Present Crisis. Here it is right here. And this is a reverend, so he's saying, does it not look as if God were not only preparing in our Anglo-Saxon civilization the die with which to stamp the peoples of the earth, but as if he were also massing behind that die the mighty power with which to press it? So he's saying, look, God has given us all of this great civilization, and he's given us the power to spread that civilization across the world, so why shouldn't we do that? That's imperialism, right? My confidence that this race is eventually to give its civilization to mankind is not based on mere numbers. China forbid. Oh, there's my cuckoo clock in the background. I look forward to what the world has never yet seen united in the same race. The greatest numbers and the highest civilization. He's saying, wouldn't it be fantastic? We could have all these great numbers of Americans and they have this highest civilization and we're going to spread it around the world. Then he goes on to explain there's apparently much truth in the belief that the wonderful progress of the United States, as well as the character of its people, are the results of natural selection. He's using Mr. Darwin as evidence here. For the more energetic and restless and courageous men from all parts of Europe have emigrated in the last 10 or 12 generations to that great country and have there succeeded best. Okay, so this one, and it goes on, there are far more arguments in there that can help you, but he's saying imperialism is a great thing because America has a great culture, and we need to spread our great culture and our strong people across the entire world. Okay, that's number 1. Let's look at number 2. This is Henry Cabot Lodge, Our Blundering Foreign Policy. Here we have it. From March 1895. Small states are of the past and have no future. The great nations are rapidly absorbing for their future expansion and their present defense all the waste places of the earth. It is a movement which makes for civilization and the advancement of the race. As one of the great nations of the world, the United States must not fall out of line of march. So he's saying all the great nations of the world are absorbing up these smaller countries because small countries are a thing of the past. They're no longer efficient, and it's important for our country to begin to absorb smaller countries as well so that we don't fall behind other European countries. There's a very definite policy for American statesmen to pursue in this respect if they would prove themselves worthy inheritors of the principles of Washington and Adams. Wow, that's quite some evidence. He's saying, you need to fall in line with George Washington and John Adams on this. We desire no extension to the South, for neither the population nor the lands of Central or South America would be desirable additions to the United States. In other words, all those places south of Texas, we don't really want any of those. Those aren't desirable. But from the Rio Grande to the Arctic Ocean, there should be but one flag and one country. Neither race nor climate forbids this extension, and every consideration of natural growth and national welfare demands it. In the interest of our commerce and of our fullest development, isn't that a fascinating term? In order to develop as much as we possibly could as a country, we have to take on these additional colonies. Here he jumps into talking about the Panama Canal and why that is important. Okay, that's document number 2. Also, pro-imperialism. So we had our first document saying that we should take on additional colonies because we have a great civilization and it is our duty to spread our great civilization across the entire world. You can see how that idea kind of led to World War II, but we'll get to that later. So we have this great civilization, we need to spread it. Document 2 was arguing that all the other countries of the world are doing this and we're going to fall behind if we don't do it. Okay, now let's look at document 3. This is a speech by William McKinley delivered to a Methodist church group. Document 3. I walked the floor of the White House night after night until midnight, and I'm not ashamed to tell you, gentlemen, that I went down on my knees and prayed Almighty God for light and guidance more than one night. And one night late, it came back to me this way. Okay, now I'm going to give you a tiny bit of background. He is specifically talking about the Philippines. So at this point, the United States has helped the Philippines to overthrow Spanish rule. We did that because we weren't all that thrilled with Spain having a colony out there. And then we had to decide what to do with it. And so President McKinley is talking through his decision. He says, well, we could give them back to Spain, but that would be cowardly and dishonorable because we just helped them get rid of Spain. We could not turn them over to France or Germany because those are our rivals and it wouldn't make any sense for us to give them to them. We could leave them to themselves, but we could not leave them to themselves because they were unfit for self-government. And they would soon have anarchy and misrule worse than Spain's was. This is one of those ideas that is no longer popular, but the idea that some people just can't govern themselves. They're just not smart enough. And so this is what McKinley is saying here. And that there was nothing left for us to do but to take them all and to educate the Filipinos and to uplift and civilize them, and by God's grace to do the very best we could by them. Now this is a really interesting argument. So instead of talking about our great race and expanding it, the American civilization, and instead of talking about that not falling behind by taking these additional colonies, he's saying we should take pity on them because they need us. There is not a better option, another country that could come in and take over them. Instead, we should do it ourselves so that we can educate them and uplift them. So it is our moral duty to take on colonies. Interesting argument. Okay, so let's jump into document 4. This is the speech by Benjamin Tillman, who's the early vice president of the Anti-Imperialist League. Here we go. A little bit of background. This is from something called Are We to Spread the Christian Religion with the Bayonet Point as Mahomet Spread Islam with a Scimitar? You can already see his bent here. He is not an imperialist like our other authors. He's an anti-imperialist. And he is actually quoting from a Kipling poem, The White Man's Burden, in which this poem's argument is that it is the white man's duty to spread the message of Christianity throughout the world. This is yet another one of those arguments that you might find offensive currently, but we have to remember that this is a historical document. He's actually talking about that in many ways, other races have held back the white race. This is his argument. And why on earth would we want to incorporate all of those races into our country? So he's saying we shouldn't get all of these colonies because the people of those colonies are not going to enrich our culture, and they might drag it down, so therefore we shouldn't have them. Okay, again, one of those arguments we would find offensive, and is offensive, but at the time was something that people believed. And he says not only that, but if we were to take over these colonies, it's going to cost a lot of American lives, and American lives are important. We want to protect them over all other peoples. And so he goes into that argument as well. Let's see, then we have document 5. This is a speech by Samuel Gompers, President of the American Federation of Labor, delivered in 1898. Let me hop up to the top here. Samuel Gompers is actually making a different argument, one that I actually mentioned in this week's overview video. It says, it's worse than folly, aye, it is a crime, to lull ourselves into the fancy that we shall escape the duties which we owe to our people by becoming a nation of conquerors, disregarding the lessons of nearly a century and a quarter of our national existence as an independent, progressive, humane, and peace-loving nation. We cannot, with safety to ourselves or justice to others, keep the workers and the lovers of reform and simple justice divided, or divert their attention, and thus render them powerless to expose abuses and remedy existing injustice. He's basically saying that taking on colonies is incompatible with the American character. It goes against the things that we believe in, and thus we should not do it. Now, he goes on to make several other arguments about why imperialism is not a good idea, but that's his core argument. How can we compel the Philippines to conform to our more or less rigid mold of government? How many lives shall we take along the way? Of course, they will seem cheap, but they are poor laborers. They'll be members of the majority in the Philippines, but they will be ruled and killed at the convenience of a very small minority. They are backed up by our armed land and sea forces. So he's saying that taking on these colonies is simply not right. Okay, so we've gone through those 5 primary source documents. Our next step is to begin thinking, which position do you want to argue? So you could argue in favor of imperialism, saying, you know what, taking on these colonies is going to give us greater power, it's going to help us to expand our civilization, it's going to help us to keep up with other countries. Those were the core arguments of the first 3 documents we had. Or you could argue against imperialism, and you could say, you know what, it's not in keeping with the American character to do this, or these colonies, they're not going to help us any. The people aren't any better than we are, so it's not going to help. Now, I understand that you may use some of these arguments as are things that you don't agree with. That's okay. The purpose of this is to stretch your brain and to argue one side or the other intelligently. And then you have to think about, well, which role fits with that? If I want to argue for imperialism, should I be an American citizen, a citizen of the Philippines, Guam, or Puerto Rico, or a citizen of another imperial nation? You can be whichever one you would like, and then write a letter arguing that. In order to earn full credit on the rubric, you can see it right here, you must use at least 2 quotes from primary sources. So you're going to want to go back to those primary sources and find quotes that will support your ideas to include in that letter to the editor. So you are an educated American citizen, you're writing a letter to the editor, either for or against imperialism, and you're using some of these sources of your day. Okay? Again, I understand it's a complicated writing assignment, but this gives you a much deeper understanding of imperialism, a deeper understanding of the ideas of the time, and also stretches your brain. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.